Today, we're going to talk about diet culture, what it is, and why you should break up with it. But before we dive into this video, I'm going to start off by sharing a letter I sent when I broke up with that toxic girl.
I never knew you were a harlot. Don't try to look for me, because if you do, I will disgrace you. Bye, and keep being the bad girl you are.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Hello, good people. I hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to my channel. If this isn't your first time here, and if it is your first time here, welcome to Happy Healthy Human. Let us get into this actual video. Diet culture is extremely toxic, man. So I'm gonna explain in this video sort of what it is, give you a formal definition, and then talk a bit about why I broke up with diet culture and why you really, really should too. Has anyone else ever actively observed the conversations that happen when you get together with your girlfriends? Like, typically it's someone criticizing themselves for being bad and being off a diet, or feeling very good about themselves for sticking to a diet and being very dedicated and losing so much weight. Like, there's just absolutely no normalcy, there's no in between, there's no ease, and just like this base level of just existing. It's either you're on this crazy restrictive diet and praising yourself for it, or you've completely flown off it and you're beating yourself up about that. Have you also noticed how ecstatic you get when someone notices or compliments you on weight loss, and how you're constantly in pursuit of more and more of that? Yeah, babes, that's diet culture. So diet culture is the pervasive belief that appearance and body image are more important than physical, psychological, and general well-being. It's a system that equates thinness with health. Diet culture totally disregards our bio-individual needs, our diverse forms and backgrounds, and basically makes most of us feel like a lot of us, women especially, struggle so much with body image, and we also have this feeling that we're doing something wrong when we don't live in a smaller and smaller body. And most of this mentality comes from diet culture. So in this video, I'm going to talk a bit about the origin of diet culture. Where does this thing come from? How did we find ourselves in the midst of this tornado of self-hate? I'm going to talk about the negative impacts that diet culture has on us. For the sake of balance and objectivity, I'll talk a little bit about some of the advantages some might say come from diet culture. And in conclusion, I'll just talk a little bit about, if I'm not dieting, then what do I eat? What do I do? How do I actually be healthy? I'll talk about that a bit, but I actually have a video which I posted last week or earlier in this week, depends on when this goes up, that explains that in way more detail, and I will link that at the end of this video so that you can sort of follow up with that and get into how you can actually maintain true health and wellness without being on some crazy restrictive diet. So let's start off with the origin of diet culture. Where did this thing come from? Food is a natural and unavoidable part of all our lives. So how did we get to this place where we're constantly at war with our stomachs? Why do Americans alone spend $61 billion a year on diet products, yet have the fastest rising cases of obesity and overweight? Several communities and notable individuals throughout history have tried some form of dieting or the other, as far as we can tell, since 400 BC. Now, mind you, a lot of the information and statistics that are available about the history of diet culture are very much sort of Eurocentric, or seen through a Caucasian lens, but we'll get into that a little bit more further down the line in the video. From the Greeks and Romans, who considered a healthy body to equal a healthy mind, which technically is not untrue, but more from the toxic lens of people in larger body cannot possibly have healthy minds, which is just so incorrect. To early Christians around 600 to 1000 AD, who associated starvation with holiness, this idea of morality being tied to body size and body weight has been so intrinsic in our subconscious for honestly so long. However, modern dieting as we know it really took off around like the 19th century, especially with the advent of like more form-fitting clothes. This meant that people in larger bodies were generally ridiculed and accused of being immoral for living in larger bodies. One book from 1881 even advised governments to arrest and imprison fat people. Guys, the rot runs deep. Now, I'm going to share how diet culture has a negative impact on literally every aspect of our lives, like our physical health, mental health, our cultures. I mean, it really is a big mess. When it comes to our physical health, this yo-yo dieting and like eating a lot one time, eating nothing sometimes, eating absolutely no carbs for a period, and then binging on sugar for a period confuses our bodies so much. Our bodies constantly think we're in a state of famine, which is also why it gets so difficult for people to even lose weight. Your body thinks that there's a drought or a famine and it needs to hold on to as much fat as possible because you're constantly starving it. So what your body really wants is to know that it's safe, and the best way to do that is just by understanding food, understanding nutrition, the importance of movement, taking care of your general, like your mental health, and just having like a stable life in which food is not controlling you. Now, a lot of diets suggest that they will show you how to not let food control your life, but they do the complete opposite because they starve you. One, they starve you of quantity, and two, they starve you of quality. And what that means is that your body remains in this state of desperation, thinking that it's actually in trouble. So your physical health really suffers from being dedicated and attached to diet culture, which, disclaimer, is absolutely not your fault. It's so pervasive, like you cannot get away from it. Everywhere we go, in almost every conversation we have, especially as women, we're constantly talking about the need to lose weight and this and that. And when people even gain weight, we're so judgmental about the fact that their bodies have changed, and we assume that we know the reasons for that. We don't consider anything other than the fact that, oh, this person has been stuffing their face. Even if that's true, why has that happened? Sometimes it's even just like the natural biological progression of our bodies. We don't expect to look the same at 25 as we did at 15. But when we're 35 and when we're 45, we still want to look like we did when we were 25. That's not how the world works. Like, your body will change, it will fluctuate. You may gain weight, you may lose weight, and that's perfectly fine as long as you maintain a baseline of health. So the first thing I'm going to stress as a negative impact of diet culture is what it has done to our physical bodies and how we just have such a warped understanding of nutrition and how to actually take care of ourselves. In addition to that, it puts you at higher risk for developing chronic disease. So high blood pressure, cardiovascular issues, blood sugar issues like diabetes. The more you sort of go up and down with the amount of like sugar you're consuming, or with the amount of carbs that you're cutting out of the diet of your diet, or the amount of fat that you're putting in your system, if you're out of whack and out of balance, you are actually doing more damage to your physical health than you think. Now, I don't even know if I need to get into too much detail about what diet culture does for your mental health. If you have ever struggled, even in the slightest, with your weight, then you understand. The guilt, the shame, the inferiority complex, the superiority complex if you live in a smaller body, or if you have successfully managed to push through a very restrictive diet and you've lost weight, or maybe you've pushed through like a crazy exercise regimen and like you have abs or whatever, and you develop this superiority complex. There's just so much toxicity around what it does to our minds. Living in this culture where thinness is equated with health is just a disaster. Like, I know that I have struggled so much, and I'm going to talk about this in a future video about sort of like my personal body image journey. But my goodness, like, all the times that I have thoughts that I was overweight or unhealthy or not taking care of myself was really me just saying, I am not good enough. That's literally it. And again, I know that that wasn't my fault, because that's all the messaging that I got from every corner, literally, like from friends and family, in the way that they spoke about themselves, which is another thing. It's like things that you would never say to yourself, but you hear people say that about themselves, and you say that to yourself as well. Just really awful things about your body, and like, calling yourself a pig, and like, why can't you stop eating? Why can't you resist chocolates? Why can't you blah, blah, blah? The damage that diet culture does to your mental health is insane, and you really need to break that chain, which is not an easy thing to do. I still struggle with it sometimes, much, much, much less than ever before. But just for the sake of transparency, obviously I still have days when I, wish I could wear this outfit, or wish I could look like this, or sometimes I have memories of things that people have said to me about my body, or about times when I've gained weight, when they just had absolutely no clue what was going on in my life, or they had no right to pass a comment, because honestly, maybe it was a marginal weight gain of like 2 kilos or 3 or something, and we've turned it into this like gargantuan thing that it's as if, I don't know. I can go on about this forever, but for the mental health aspects of what happens with subscribing to diet culture, it's really a disaster, and I do not recommend. Another massively negative impact of diet culture, which is actually so, I take this one really personally, is homogenizing cultures. And what I mean by that is, we are all in pursuit of, well, originally we were all in pursuit of the body type of a white woman, pretty much, which is just very slender, very thin. And don't get me wrong, I know that you have people obviously of all ethnicities. You have Black people that are also naturally very slim, but the average African woman, for example, is a curvy girl. And we all were out here, especially like in the 90s, maybe like the early noughties, just out here striving to look like thin white women, which is just not our nature. And this, obviously, I'm speaking from my perspective. I'm talking about like majority of Black women that are curvy. I know that we obviously come in different sizes, but that's just the perspective I'm speaking on right now. And now we're in pursuit of this absolute hybrid, where you're the skinny white woman in the middle, but you're the busty woman with the big bum and the big hips at the same time. You have people who are dying on operating tables in pursuit of this body type. And, the most interesting thing I find is like, you go under the knife to get this surgery, and then you put on fitness gear and take pictures with this body and make it seem like, oh, now I'm healthy and I'm working out and I'm fit because I went under the knife and got this kind of body. There just really could not be a better illustration of diet culture than that, where it matters more how you present on the outside than how your organs and your body and everything are actually doing on the inside, which is crazy. So one of the things I really hate is how, like, even African women that have always been like majority quite voluptuous and quite curvy women absolutely hate our bodies and are constantly trying to be in smaller bodies. So yeah, I really just hate the fact that African women that are quintessentially on average quite voluptuous, quite curvy women, and those curves include also around the waist. Like, it's not just your bum and your boobs or whatever. Just going around and hating our bodies and hating our natural form. I really, really hate that. And I sort of hate that, it's been taken away from us, the having these features actually be attractive. And now it's like, oh, no, you have to sculpt and you have to cut here and you have to cut there and add here and add there. It's just a disaster, man. And I remember, like in certain African literature, there's so many different descriptions of women, particularly from, I would say, like literature from like the 70s, the 80s. You have descriptions of like tall, slim, dark women. You have descriptions of women with, these, I don't know, crazy big hips and, you know, whatever, just like a very diverse representation of Black women, and everyone had their beautiful features that made them attractive. And now we're all just trying to look like one cookie cutter prototype. I don't know. So yes, the homogenization of culture is one thing that I think is such a big mess from diet culture, and one of the things that I really, really cannot stand. And the last thing I would say is also a really negative impact is just on identity, you know, like everyone is trying to be one type of woman. And I think that is extremely problematic. And I think it's such a negative impact that diet culture has had on us, where we are all trying to be like one cookie cutter person. And, you know, even in our social interactions, we're constantly feeling like we're not good enough. We're constantly feeling like we don't measure up, and constantly sort of, you know, and this kind of ties in obviously to the mental health point that I made before. But specifically, it's like we're losing our sense of individuality and being able to stand in your individual truth, whatever that looks like, and also pursue health, whatever that looks like for you, according to your bio-individual needs. I think it's such a shame that diet culture has kind of taken away our identities to where we should have such diverse options for how people move. For example, everyone doesn't have to be a gym rat, you know. It's okay to be someone who just likes taking walks every day in the evening. It's okay to be someone who is more of a dancer. It's okay to be someone who is more of like a sportsman, like a swimmer or a tennis player. It's very okay to have individual identities in our pursuit of health without pursuing thinness or pursuing one body type. So this loss of identity is also something that I think is a major hazard of diet culture. And yeah, child, she can keep going on this topic. I can really, really keep going. So for the sake of objectivity, and I guess to kind of keep the video balanced, the only thing I can really say is like arguably an advantage is that diets tend to be people's first introduction to nutrition, albeit with a major side order of toxicity. But there are a lot of people who their first understanding of what foods are and how they function in their body or in our bodies comes from, you know, I don't know, reading a book about some diet or something, and then it explains how the different food groups interact and how they work. But as I mentioned in this video here, you don't need to be on a diet to understand those things. In fact, I highly advise that you don't learn those things through a diet, because then you learn the unhealthy way to balance these things out. So yeah, I mean, I guess most people's first foray into nutrition is through a diet, but I think it's very important that we sort of change this mentality. I think it's so vital for nutrition and wellness in this balanced and healthy way to be something that's introduced and taught properly in schools, without talking about weight loss or the need to like be in constant pursuit of a smaller body. The other thing is that diets sometimes can give people a sense of control. So sometimes if you have spiraled into like binge eating or under eating, being on some kind of diet or following some kind of meal plan can help people feel a bit more in control. But the thing is, most of the time, this is very short-lived, and you kind of, because they're so restrictive, and like I said, it doesn't cater to your culture most of the time. It doesn't cater to your identity, your bio-individual needs. So most of the time, most of us will fall off because there's just not one size that fits all when it comes to how to eat. So some people, it can help you have like gain a sense of control when you start off with a diet, but typically it's very short-lived. And I guess I could also say that it can sometimes be a good way for people to kickstart a wellness journey. Again, a diet might get you interested in caring more about your body and caring more about your health. And if you are one of the lucky few who is able to go from a diet where you're like trying to look a certain way to just understanding nutrition and understanding food, and kind of like easing your way into a healthy lifestyle, But honestly, that is about 7% of people that go on diets that end up going down that road, and that might actually be quite a generous percentage. So I mean, nothing is ever 100% bad, but I honestly think that the culture of dieting is majority like extremely toxic, and something that we should continue to work very hard to break down, encouraging people to just understand proper nutrition, understand their bio individual movement needs. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I will also link another video here that explains what bio individuality is. And ultimately, we should have control over our own food choices and not rely on external sources to kind of tell us what and how to eat. So I know when it comes to dieting, a lot of people are very worried about like, okay, this all sounds good, ditch diet culture, break up with diet culture, but what do I do now? Well, fortunately, the last video I posted talks exactly about that. If I'm not dieting, how should I be eating? And I will link it up here so that you can watch it after this video. And hopefully that can give you some base knowledge on nutrition and how you can kind of start to manage those things yourself. I also talk in that video about health coaching services which I provide if you're looking for some one-on-one support. But honestly, once you really understand the base, it's a fantastic place to start taking control and like making food choices for yourself. For most people, the biggest fear when it comes to ditching dieting is about, gaining weight indiscriminately and just being so afraid of living in a larger body. And honestly, one, I do think we need to think a lot more about fat phobia, where that comes from, sort of like the idea that like an incremental 1 or 2 kilos is the worst thing that could ever happen to me. There are people that are good and amazing people living in larger bodies. You don't have to be one of those people, but the more you kind of like are so petrified of gaining even the tiniest bit of weight, the more you're actually indirectly discriminating against people like that. So I think it's important to kind of be mindful about how we talk about some of this stuff. But the other thing is that when you understand what food actually does in your body, you can make healthy choices without it being such a chore. And you can also live a life where you still eat things that you love, that are not maybe as nutrient dense as your everyday foods, but because you understand what your body needs from a health perspective, you just generally make better choices about your food and like how you eat. So yeah, 100% I understand and I can completely relate, because I've gone through that phase as well of being so petrified of not being on a diet. But I promise you there's another way to live. It's a better way to live. And the more you follow this channel and subscribe, the more content I'm going to share to make it a lot clearer about how you can just kind of live life with so much more ease when it comes to your health and wellness. I also want to make the point that there are so many other metrics for health other than your weight. We are so weight obsessed. There are other things that we need to pay attention to. You can tell so much from your eyes, from your skin, from your tongue, from your cardiovascular health. Like, are you able to keep up when you're chasing around like a puppy, or if you're playing with your children or playing with your nieces or nephews? Like, are you able to play around for half an hour without gassing out, right? These are other metrics that you can pay attention to. How do you feel? Are you in pain? Do you have low back pain? Do you have muscle pain? Are you constantly fatigued? Are you getting enough sleep? All these things are infinitely more important for like the quality and quantity of life that we're able to live than simply what the number is on the scale, which most of the time is actually inaccurate. So I hope you'll keep following along with a lot of this content that I'm going to share, because I promise you, like, there is a better way to live, and it's my dream and my mission to get more and more people, especially my curvy girls, to just love ourselves and love ourselves enough to focus more on what really matters when it comes to our health. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any thoughts or anything that came to mind while you were watching this, please share with me in the comment section. If you have anything that you really want me to talk about, something that nags on you when it comes to anything health and wellness related, I live for this stuff. I will be really happy to respond and to maybe even make a whole video in response to your question. So please remember to like, subscribe, and share this with anyone you think would be interested. But most importantly, never forget that nothing good in life has ever missed you because of belly fat.